Alright, this one is going to be yet another rant on J. Dyer, who is a liar, and it rhymes. Now, a guy called Bolt892 made a comment on my last video, and all he did was put a link to J. Dyer's Sedevacantism Proves Orthodox Theology. J. Dyer. J. Dyer, as I've said before, I've done a video on him before, is a liar, a moron, and he's basically an autist without the benefit of any higher intelligence. He is literally a gamma sperg who can't argue anything, can't think properly, and he lies. He outright lies. Now, that video of his, this Sedevacantism Proves Orthodox Theology, is 2 hours, 29 minutes long. 2.5 hours, 2:29 and 57. 2.5 hours. I've watched 23 minutes of it, and that's all I'll need to watch of it. In fact, after the first 2 minutes, I had everything I needed to have to demonstrate that he's just an outright liar, a conscious, intentional liar. He's not lying because he's too dumb to know he's lying. He is actually lying knowing that he's lying. He is also dumb, and some of the lies are the result of him being stupid, uneducated, ignorant, and just not very intelligent. But he is a conscious liar. So, let's start. 23 minutes that I watched, 23 lies that I've written down, 23 points. Although the first 4 or 5 points happen literally before 2 minutes are up, okay? So let's start from the beginning. Lie number 1. He starts off by saying that the Sedevacantist movement, and by the way, let me just parenthesis here, he wraps in Sedevacantism with Sedeprivationism, kind of, tries to blur the gray areas if they're the same thing. They're generally they're not the same thing. Sedeprivationism is the solid fact that there is an imposter in the seat of Peter. Sedevacantism says the seat is empty. The seat is clearly not empty. There's an imposter in it. So to be a Sedevacantist, it's technically wrong on its face. So Sedeprivationist is the correct thing. Anyway, he starts off saying that it's not a significant movement, that it's only online, and that, there's not that many people into it. That's absolute bullshit. I will put a link below this video to Lux Vera, which is a link where you've got, I'm just trying to see if I have it opened here already or not. It's a place where you've got a bunch of churches around the world. It's called ecclesia.luxvera.org, but I'll put the link in the thing. And it's got churches all over the world, in the United States and outside of the United States. There are hundreds of churches there, of people that are essentially reject Vatican II and therefore are still valid Catholics. So the fact that it's not a significant movement and it's all online, that's a lie. That's a J. Dyer lie, right? Point number 2, he says these people are LARPing at being Christian. And again, he is absolutely wrong. Oh, and then he conflates it by saying that they are like the Protestants. No, they're not. I understand why he tries to say that, and that's because he was a Protestant, and in fact he was a Calvinist for many years. And again, to be a Calvinist, you have to be retarded. And then he goes on about how Calvinism believes there's an invisible church, and and the Catholics sort of believe there's an invisible throne. No, that's just J. Dyer lies and bullshit. I don't know where he gets this stuff from. Well, I mean I do. He's a liar, so he just makes shit up. But anyway, point number 3, he goes on to try and conflate Vatican I with the papacy. But, the problem that J. Dyer has is that he thinks that the papacy determines the whole Catholic Church. It doesn't. The Pope is nothing but a bishop. That's it. And he is the head of the church when he is a legitimate Pope. That's all. Just like a bishop has authority over priests, all bishops have equal authority. The head of the church, the Pope, has got more authority simply because he's the guy in charge of how things are run. That's all it says. But J. Dyer doesn't understand this. And he thinks that only the Pope can determine who is and isn't a Catholic. No, that's a lie. Then he goes on to try and say that the whole constitution of the church has been fundamentally altered. That's a lie. Nothing has been altered about the constitution of the church. And he refers to this guy John Pontrello's book, The Sed Vacantis Delusion. John Pontrello clearly, like J. Dyer, is either a liar or an idiot or both. And now here we come to it. J. Dyer says, no, but I've been a Sed Vacantist for years, you know. I was part of the SSPX. SSPX are heretics, just like the Novus Organs. The SSPX is the Ben Shapiro of the right. You know, they're the fake Catholics that pretend to be traditional. They're not. SSPX are heretical. They recognize some of the popes as being legitimate when they're not. They try to say, oh, the pope's legitimate, but we won't obey. You can't do that. If the pope is legitimate, then he should have authority over your church. If you don't obey the pope when you believe that he is the pope, well, then you are schismatic, okay? The fact is that we have not had a legitimate pope since 1958. How do we know this? Again, the next thing he tries to say, let me just carry on down the list of his lies. He says that no one has the right to dethrone a pope. That's absolute bullshit. As a very clear law by the magisterium of the church, Canon Law 188, as I keep going on about, you don't have to be a genius to understand this stuff, right? But the fact is that J. Dyer is an idiot. So it's not that he's not a genius, he's stupid. He doesn't get it. And he goes on to say that, oh, well, privationists or Sed Vacantists all pick an arbitrary date from which the Pope is no longer valid. No, it's not arbitrary at all. It's absolutely clear. Anyone who professes to have defected from the Catholic faith or is a persistent heretic, which is the same thing. If you're a persistent heretic, you are defecting from the Catholic faith publicly when you preach that stuff. Okay? If you're a cleric of the church and you preach heresy, you are publicly defecting from the Catholic faith. If you preach Vatican II concepts, you are preaching heresy. You have a 6-month period from once you start doing that to recant publicly and return to the Catholic faith. If you do not, you vacate your office. End of. Nobody needs to pronounce anything. It doesn't matter what your office is, whether it's the Petrine seat or whether it's a local parish. You vacate it. That's it. Done. You are no longer a valid cleric of the Catholic Church. It's not difficult to understand. But J. Dyer can't grasp it because he has hung out with, he says that the Sed Vacantists are the same ecclesiologists as the Calvinists. This is a fundamental lack of basic understanding of Christianity. Never mind Catholicism and Sed Vacantism. He is a moron. And he's proud of the fact that he's read all the reformers of the church and that they believe in this invisible church who nobody knows exactly what it is and where it is. But, if you're part of this church, then you're going to be saved. And if you're not, you're not. But the worldly church is all split. Well, that makes no fucking sense. That's not what we got told in the Bible, that there's an invisible church. No, your church is always going to be present. It is the Catholic Church. It always has been present. It's still there. Unbroken line. All right. And then he goes on to say about how the first, Rama, some guy called Rama, wrote the first Sed Vacantist book. No, it wasn't. There were Sed Vacantists or Sed Privationists, as I prefer to call them, because Sed Vacantists are essentially wrong. Sed Privationists have been Sed Privationists from the start. Okay? The Mater Boni Concili, the CRMI, all these guys, they're all, when Vatican II came out, they said, no, this is not right. And it basically took them until about 1966, which is, the 6 months expiry period after 1965, when the last documents of Vatican II came out. So from 66 on, these guys were like, nah, this is nonsense. And because the church moves prudently, and generally that means it takes time to make official pronouncements and so on, the people that have said, this is no longer the Catholic Church, generally did so, from the beginning, but made official statements and sort of took official public positions in the early 70s. And the Mater Boni Concili, for example, has been going on since then. So here's the next point. So J. Dyer says that, Sed Vacantism doesn't make any sense. when he says that he was still an SSPS guy, so he's never actually been a sedevacantist. He's always been Novus Ordo, because that's what SSPX are. They are Novus Ordo. They just pretend not to be, but that's what they are. And he says he's had no contact at all since 2006 to 2008. So he's a liar and an idiot. He's never been a sedevacantist, doesn't know what sedevacantism is, doesn't understand the position of the church, doesn't understand the position of the Pope in the hierarchy of the church, doesn't understand that the magisterium of the church, which is what he tries to say, is not being followed. Oh, the magisterium of the church is being ignored. No, it's not being ignored. It's being followed. The magisterium of the church put together the book of canon law, compiled all the canon laws of the Catholic Church into one document, in one book, called Canon Law of the Catholic Church, the Pio Benedictine Code of Canon Law of 1917. That was put together by the magisterium of the Church. The laws in that book essentially explain what is and is not the law of the Church. And one of those laws, 188, Part 4, says if you are a persistent heretic who defects from the Catholic faith, you lose your office without any pronouncements from anybody, any office. There is no limit on it. If the Pope starts to preach heresy, he is no longer the Pope. And that's precisely what happened. Oh, it's an arbitrary date. No, it's not arbitrary at all. It is probably upon your own conscience what you believe, but if you investigate this, it is patently clear to me that from the 28th of October 1958 on, we have only had anti-popes. There is one possible exception, which is Pope, is it John the second or the first? Anyway, the guy who only reigned for 30 days. His reign was possibly too short to really know. So if you want to be charitable, you can say that there's doubt on him whether he was a valid pope or not. But it doesn't really matter, because he lasted 30 days before he was either killed or died. And it's still not clear. There is a decent amount of evidence to suggest he was possibly murdered. Probably because of his actions, which he seemed to start to take actions that would be in line with a genuine pope. So possibly that's why they got rid of him. But in any case, why can we say that, oh, from 1958 on? Because what we can definitely say, without a shadow of a doubt, is that any pope from 65 on who preached or who continued the Vatican II heresies is absolutely a heretic and apostate, and therefore has vacated their office. There's no doubt about that at all. Now, some charitable people are saying, well, but maybe it should be 1962 on, because only after 1962, when the first documents of Vatican II came out, then the people who didn't reject that stuff, then you can say they were persistent heretics. You know, if you're more charitable, you could choose 1962, I suppose. But to me, that's not enough, because who created Vatican II was Pope John the 23rd, fake Pope John the 23rd, Angelo Roncalli, who instigated Vatican II. Given that Vatican II is heretical, given that he created it, he himself is heretical. Absolutely. And so, again, prudence dictates that you do not accept him as a legitimate pope. And it doesn't really make any difference, because the whole point is Vatican II is what's heretical. He invented Vatican II, he created Vatican II, and all the popes that came after him either promoted it, promulgated it, or created part of it. So they're all vacated their office. They all have vacated their office. It's a simple rule. It's not difficult. You have to be a level of idiot to not understand that basic stuff, which J. Dyer is. And he is also a liar. Now, the problem is that he is such a moron and a liar, because he's basically an autist. He's the spurgy autist that the Pope's the big boss. Pope's the big boss. You don't have the big boss. So doesn't church broken. No big boss, church broken. That's the level of intellect this guy's at. No, the Pope is not the big boss. The Pope is a hierarchical structure to run the church, but he is a bishop just like any other bishop. And if he were a valid pope, he has a lot of power in the church, of course, because he determines how the church is run, which is fair enough. But we haven't had a pope for 68, 70 years or whatever. He repeats, point number 12 that I'm at now. He repeats that it's only an online world. It's absolutely not. Like I said, I've got the link. Go and look it up. There's hundreds of churches, and there's many people at each one of these churches. And so he's lied on multiple points. He doesn't understand that the Pope is not the end-all and be-all of the Catholic Church, and that the Pope is absolutely ousted by the magisterium of the Church, which is valid, which is the canon law of 1917. So he outs himself. That's it. It's done. Nobody needs to pronounce anything. That is the whole point of that law. And that's why it exists, to get rid of stuff like that. He goes on to say that the Novus Ordo has some correct points. No, it doesn't. The Novus Ordo Church is composed of either complete dupes, people who have been fooled into believing they're in the Catholic Church, and there are many of those. The majority of lay people fall into that category, and I suggest probably quite a high number of so-called clerics fall into that category. They may think they're Catholic priests or even bishops. Much more difficult for a bishop to not know what's going on. But there might be a few priests that really believe that they are a Catholic priest, and they're not. They're part of the clergy of a satanic Freemasonic church called Novus Ordo. That's the name I've given to it. It's a good name, it sticks. So, clerics of the Novus Ordo Church are not Catholics. So no, they do not have any point about Catholicism at all. It's irrelevant what they think, what they say, what they do. They're not Catholics. They're not Catholic clerics. And he keeps on going, saying that, sedevacantists or sedeprivationists reject the ordinary universal magisterium. No, nobody's rejecting the magisterium of the Church. We're following the magisterium of the Church, which clearly state heretics are not clerics of the Catholic Church. End of. Again, I don't know how many times I need to repeat this. He clearly hasn't got it. And then he goes on to say that the Pope is the only determinant of who is legitimate. No. The magisterium of the Church is who determines who is legitimate. And the magisterium of the Church clearly states if you're a heretic and if you promulgate heresy publicly, you are not a cleric of the Catholic Church, regardless of whether you're a bishop, a cardinal, a pope. Doesn't matter. You are no longer a valid cleric. Again, Jay, wake the fuck up, you retard. Read basic English, it's like... And so that was point 15. Now we're at 16. And this is the point. Because he's a sperg, he's an autist, and he needs order. And look, I'm a sperg myself, but I've got a high IQ, so I can get past it. He can't. This guy, I doubt if he's a basic 100 IQ guy. He's an autist, so he reads all these books, doesn't understand them, doesn't understand the basics. But that's how he feels he's important. That's how he feels he's found his niche. He's a moron. He doesn't understand what he reads, and he reads a lot of trash. Quite frankly, he read all the books of Calvin and all the books of Luther. And really? Well, why? He could have used it as toilet paper. It would have been more useful. But anyway, he can't basically deal with reality. So he has to have all these rigid little rules. And because of that, he can understand that there's a very simple rule that says if you're a heretic, that's it. You're not a cleric of the Church. End of. It's not difficult. But of course, if you accept that truth, well, then you're a little bit in limbo because but who's the boss? Who's the boss? Where's my leader? Where's my leader? That's who Dyer is. It's a lost little fart in the wind who needs to have a leader. Otherwise, he doesn't know where to take a shit. Never mind what to think, And then this is point 17, and then he says, well, before I get into all that, and he goes on a monologue about all the things that he's read. Who gives a fuck, Jay? Who cares what you've read? It doesn't matter. Make your case. You don't have one. Your case is that the Pope is the only one that can decide who is and isn't a valid cleric. That is wrong and a lie. Your next point is that the magisterium of the Church is not being respected. That is wrong and a lie. Sedevacantism is only an online movement. That is wrong and a lie. They take an arbitrary date. That is wrong and a lie. Start to see a pattern here. Then he goes on to talk about wandering bishops. Now, wandering bishops have got nothing to do with sedeprivationism or sedevacantism. Wandering bishops are con men who pretend to be a bishop of the old Catholic Church, this, that, the other. They're completely schismatic con men. They're not even really pretending to be a church. They're just trying to pretend to be a church to scam you and fleece you of money and power and so on. Wandering bishops has never been anything to do with sedevacantism or sedeprivationism or the Catholic Church. They are con men. They're literally Gnostics. They are, the magician Simon who says, I am the apostle of Jesus, That's it. Now he tries to conflate this with the sedeprivationists and sedevacantists. Again, that is an outrageous lie. It's an outrageous and intentional deception on Jay's part. And he knows this because, these guys are like trailer park, like bishops, trailer park popes. Yeah, they are. And that's got nothing to do with sedeprivationist or sedevacantism. So trying to conflate the two things is disingenuous and the tactic of a liar and a deceiver, Jay. Well, then he says, there's no hierarchs. There are no hierarchs. Again, because he's a sperg. Who do I follow? Who's the big boss? Who's the big boss? You moron. Any valid bishop has got a hierarchy. Take Bishop Sanborn, with whom I have quite a lot to disagree on, because Bishop Sanborn is not following canon law because he worldly says you either follow my authority or you can't have the sacrament. So he's a liar, an idiot, and a power-hungry, money-hungry fool. But the sacraments that he gives are valid. The priests that get formed in his seminary are valid. He's a valid bishop. He's breaking canon law on the worldly stage and therefore also affecting the spiritual stage when he tries to deny people the sacraments because of what he's doing. But he's not the only bishop of the Catholic Church. There are several bishops of the Catholic Church spread all over in the Instituto Mater Boni Concilii, in the CMRI. Again, look at that Ecclesiasta Lux Vera website that I've put the link on. There's plenty of churches with plenty of valid priests. There's enough valid bishops around. But you can see that this is his main issue, right? And his whole point is like how many books he's read and how big the movement is. Look, it doesn't fucking matter how many books you've read. And it doesn't matter if 10 million people say that 2 and 2 is 10. They're wrong. That's it. What matters is the truth, not how many people believe your stupidity. Jay Dyer's got, 40,000 followers or whatever it is. That's 40,000 fools. That's 40,000 people that haven't got a clue because they're listening to an idiot talk idiocy, But then again, MPAI is a thing. Most people are idiots. It's a fact. So there's no surprises here. But how many books you've read and how many people believe your nonsense has got absolutely zero bearing on the truth. None. The truth is based on facts. Facts are based on dialectic argument and objective reality, demonstrable objective reality. It doesn't matter what you believe. I don't care what your opinion is. Your opinion, my opinion, doesn't matter. What matters are the facts. The fact is the magisterium of the church put together a document that clearly states what the rules of the church are, and if you break a specific one of those rules, you are no longer a cleric of the church. End of. So it's very simple. It's not difficult. Who are the hierarchs? There's no hierarchy. There is. Any valid priests of the Catholic Church, any valid bishop of the Catholic Church has got the right to give sacraments. I'll get into the little bit of details of further on about, and he goes on about, the office of the papacy is what matters, the office of the papacy. Exactly, you dickhead. And the office of the papacy has been vacated by the people sitting in it because they are arch heretics. They have vacated their office. In other words, they have no right to perform any of the rites of a cleric of the Catholic Church because they are not clerics of the Catholic Church. The office of the papacy, in that spiritual respect, is vacant. It is materially filled with an impostor. That's it. And his whole point is that you need this chair. You need the spiritual chair to be fixed. Otherwise, you don't have a church. No. The church, the seat of the Pope is not the church. The seat of the Pope is just the seat of the Pope. It's plenty of bishops around, there's plenty of priests around. Well, not plenty of bishops, but enough to keep the remnant of the church alive and well. And then he goes on to say, and there's no possible way to get a new pope, so I can't follow a leader. And, no, you moron. I've actually laid this out in our strategy going forward. All that needs to happen for a new pope to be elected is that the sedict-privationist movement continues to grow as it is, because the nominal Catholics are waking up. That's part of most of the reasons why I do the videos. And the nominal Catholics are waking up. The numbers of the sedict-privationists are rising every day. The idiot bishops like Bishop Sanborn will soon be marginalized because people will stop donating money to him, and that's a lot of what he is concerned about. So when people start to realize that he's trying to take an authority he has got no legitimacy to because of canon law, I'll do a separate show on this maybe, people will stop donating money to him, and eventually he will either apostatize or he will repent and come back into the fold. But his sacraments are valid, and the priest is forming invalid. He is acting improperly in the material world, and it's having consequences in the spiritual world for those people that he's excluding from his masses and so on, because he is in error. In the current state, no bishop and no priest has any authority to decide. They are not parish priests. They don't have a parish because there is no authority to sort of tell them who and where they belong. But all you have to do is keep these numbers growing, keep forming proper priests, keep forming proper bishops, and eventually there will be enough bishops that they can come together, form a conclave, and elect a new pope. The Novus Ordo Church has got nothing to do with Catholicism, so what they carry on doing is irrelevant to us. It's kind of like, for those of you that have watched that show, Designated Survivor, it's a little bit like that, like at the beginning. I mean, it's a crap show, and especially down to the third season, it just becomes, trannies everywhere, whatever. It's a bullshit show. But the premise of that show, it starts off with Capitol Hill getting blown up, and every single member of essentially the U.S. government dying except for these 2 or 3 survivors, and the designated survivor. This is sort of a similar thing. It didn't happen with a bomb, it happened with an infiltration, but the vast majority of the clerics of the church have suddenly disappeared. They've become heretics and therefore invalid. So there's only a few left, and we have to rebuild. That's it. Eventually, once there's enough of them, they can call a conclave and they can elect a proper pope. By that time, it'll be very obvious, it's already very obvious, that the Bergoglian heretic stuff and whoever's going to take over after him, if anybody, because he might well be the last fake pope before the collapse, for all we know. But it'll be very clear that those people have got nothing to do with the Catholic Church. I mean, Bergoglio recently put a demonic statuette and a demonic representation of it on the altar of Christ, which is absolutely sacrilegious, completely invalidates everything. If anybody had any doubt about him, just look at my last video. Never mind, he's the vicar of pedophiles on earth, and he is an absolute Freemason satanic scumbag. So, he's not any kind of Catholic, and it'll be absolutely clear that the structure of the Novus Ordo Church, they've stolen all the buildings, they've stolen all the property, they're imposters, but it's very clear already that they've got nothing to do with Catholicism, and it's only going to become clearer down the line. So, and then here comes his last stupidity, which he believes that to be a sedict-privationist, you have to be in union with a vacant office. No, you don't. You can't be in union with a vacant office. I don't know what autistic level of stupidity this guy comes from, but it's pretty severe, as you can tell. So that's it. Once again, J. Dyer just talking absolute lies and nonsense. And, trying to say, sedevacantism is leads to orthodoxy. No, it doesn't. Orthodoxy is a schismatic sect of people that are pretty close to the mark, as far as being Christians are, but they're not right. And, J. Dyer obviously felt the need to talk for 2.5 hours lies and nonsense to try and convert these small, tiny group of people that are meaningless and are only online. Yeah? Why would you spend 2.5 hours talking about that then? Here's why. Because the Catholic Church has always, always, always been attacked all the time by everybody. Why? Because it's true. You know, how do you know that you're over the target? You're receiving flack all the time. No one gets more attacks than the Catholic Church. No one ever has. The Catholic Church has catechized the world. As I said the last time, the Orthodox have just stagnated and made pacts with the Islamists, which try to destroy Christendom. And if it was up to the Orthodox, there would be no Christendom, because it is the Catholics that held back the wave of Islam, not the Orthodox. The Orthodox made deal with them, betrayed Christianity, the Catholics, in order to stay alive and survive in their own little enclave. They did not catechize anybody. If they had, China, the whole of Asia, all the way out to Japan, would be Orthodox. They're not. The Catholics went to China, the Catholics went to Japan and got crucified for the trouble, and still converted some samurai in secret that remained Catholics to the end of their days in secret, because being a Catholic in Japan in those days was a death penalty. So there you go. J. Dyer is a liar. He's also quite stupid, and he is an autist. He has zero value as a theologian. Zero. Okay? He's just speaking to hear his own voice, and he believes that he's a leader. No. That guy spends his time doing mental masturbation on other people's books and not understanding them. Okay? He needs a strong leader. And, you know, maybe one day he'll find some dominatrix that'll peg him the right way. I don't know. But he's got nothing to say that is valid, legitimate, logical, or true. And that's the main point. He is a liar. So there is no further need for me to further tear him apart. Everything that he said in those first 23 minutes is an absolute lie, to a degree that it invalidates anything else he possibly has to say. He has clearly demonstrated he doesn't understand the papacy, he doesn't understand Catholicism, he doesn't understand the church, he doesn't understand Christianity, he doesn't understand the apostolic succession, he doesn't understand what the papacy is or what it's for, and he doesn't understand how you stop being a cleric of the Catholic Church. So, you know, what else have you got? I mean, frankly, at this point, is there any reason to listen to a single word that comes out of that guy's mouth? And that's it. There you go. You got a Sunday rant for the day. Good night.